Coronavirus lockdown could be days away in Spain. One of the countries hardest hit in Europe by the virus, the Spanish government is still picking up the pieces after over 28,000 deaths in its first COVID-19 wave. But as temperatures drop and people head indoors, infections are rising and hospitals are beginning to be overwhelmed. While South Africa embraces lockdown level 1, what can we learn from countries about the experience when it comes to peaking in infections? Nickolaus Bauer filed this report from Madrid.
As Spain enjoys the last few days of the European summer, something is lurking around the corner. And it's not just grey skies and chilly weather. After COVID-19 ravaged the country in March and April, the coronavirus is back. Hospitals like this one in the west of Madrid are already experiencing a surge in coronavirus admissions. And with daily infection averages of 5,000 for the past week, experts warn that a second wave of COVID-19 infections is already underway in Spain. Hospitals are not being overrun like earlier in the year, when bodies were piling up in municipal halls and ice rinks. But tension is mounting.
The situation is critical. Our healthcare services are starting to be overwhelmed again in both primary and emergency care. We will be obliged to take harsher measures to enforce social distancing, strictly controlling the capacity of venues and completely closing some businesses again.
Schools remain open. Transport is operating at capacity. Commerce is back at full tilt. But after 900 deaths in the past week alone, there is no longer talk of if, but when there will be another government-enforced national quarantine.
I feel anxious and I feel a little bit abandoned from our government because they are turning this crisis into a political battle between the communities and the central government.
Que esto puede durar 2 o 3 años.
I understand COVID-19 will be with us for the next few years, and we will constantly have this choice between people's health and the economy. Obviously, you'll always choose to protect life, but the economic effects will be devastating.
Supongo que tendremos que elegir por la salud, pero tendrá unas consecuencias.
The message for South Africa from experts here is make the necessary sacrifices now to avoid slipping back into the grip of COVID-19 emergency regulations.
You need to continue taking this very seriously. If we cease being vigilant, we are going to be faced with no choice but to return to stricter lockdowns around the world. COVID-19 has not been defeated. It's still with us. Listen to your health authorities. Wear your mask. Avoid public gatherings, especially in confined spaces.
We just don't know what will happen next in Spain, or South Africa for that matter. But don't pack away your mask or hand sanitizer just yet. Nickolaus Bauer, Madrid.
We now take you live to Newsroom Africa's Nickolaus Bauer, who joins us now from west of Madrid in Spain. Nickolaus, a very good morning to you. You've just painted a really grim picture of the situation on the ground in the Spanish capital, speaking about healthcare services starting to get overwhelmed. As you assess the situation by the day, what are some of the factors that are coming out and developing in that country?
Yes, good morning to you. Paul, we join you from the hospital Porta de Hierro here in the west of Madrid. And as I alluded to in that report, the medical services here in Spain are starting to experience a surge in coronavirus cases and hospital admissions around the country. The most serious being, of course, in the Spanish capital here. This particular hospital has not been overwhelmed just yet, but they are experiencing a higher case number of COVID-19 positive cases coming in for treatment over the past fortnight and indeed for the past month as well. Having a look at the numbers, in the past week alone, there's been an average of 5,000 new infections that have been recorded on a daily basis. And in terms of mortalities, it is just over 1,000 people that have now succumbed to COVID-19 in Spain over the past 7 days. What that's resulted in, Paul, is local governments being forced into another stage of lockdown. And in the Spanish capital itself, it's seeing large parts of areas throughout the entirety of Madrid being forced to observe social distancing by authorities ordering people to stay in their homes and essentially embracing another lockdown during this second wave of COVID-19.
Nickolaus, as we experience here at home in South Africa and much of the rest of the world, there is a political dimension in attempts to keep people safe from the coronavirus. What are some of the strategies that have been put out in place there in Spain?
Well, as we experienced back home in South Africa as well, with the Western Cape being run by the DA, a lot of toing and froing between the national and provincial governments. It's much the same here in Spain. There's 17 autonomous regions in Spain itself, Madrid being one of them, and essentially there's a certain level of autonomy, with local governments not supporting, in essence, the measures to enter into a hard lockdown. It was already decided by the central government that any region with over 500 confirmed infections over a fortnight per 100,000 of the population, just to repeat that, 500 positive COVID-19 cases per 100,000 of the population over a 2-week period would need to be forced into lockdown. That, alongside 35% of all available intensive care unit beds being needed for COVID-19 patients, those particular areas would be locked down. Now, what it's resulted in essentially is a political bun fight between the central government that is run by the centre-left PSOE and, of course, the local administration that's run by the main opposition party, Partido Popular, the centre-right opposition party. And they've essentially said that the central government is willy-nilly going into another lockdown, not taking into account the full economic effects that another lockdown will have. The Spanish economy really brought to its knees during the initial lockdown phase, experiencing one of the sharpest drops in GDP growth during the lockdown itself. And much like the rest of the world, I mean, it's something that we experienced in South Africa, but we often forget back home that politics is always going to play a role in attempts to try and keep people safe. And not everybody's going to be happy, let's just be quite honest. Yes. But the fact of the matter is there's a high caseload of COVID-19 cases here in Spain, and medical experts are advising authorities that they need to take harsh measures now before there is a great deal of death like they saw in March and April.